What's going on, guys? Pete Nova here from First Read Fantasy. I am joined by Matt from the FF Mediators, and today we're just going to hop right into it. We have a Superflex Tight End Premium startup draft for you today. We're going to do 15 rounds, and we're just going to go ahead and kick this thing off. Let me go ahead and hit the start button, and away we go. Now, let me make sure that the volume's off because I hate the volume during these. But Matt, a lot of times with the with startup drafts, I feel like there's such an emphasis with Superflex on the quarterback position and making sure you get two quarterbacks in the first three rounds, right? Um, is there a scenario where you generally stray from that? I mean, right here, you're in the back end of the draft at the 111. A lot of quarterbacks are going to go off the board before then. A lot of good skill players are going to be there. But when would be a time where you do stray off of that?
I think it's just going to depend. Like, if I, for some reason, let's say I'm here at the 111, maybe a guy like Joe Burrow falls where people chase those wide receivers, I'd take him and I'd be a little more comfortable with having a different QB2, maybe take a veteran route as opposed to slamming back to back quarterbacks. It really just depends on who I land. So if you're at one of these early picks and you get a big name like Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Lamar, Burrow, Hurts, it gives you a lot of wiggle room to figure out what you want to do going forward. So if you have a superstar, you've got some flexibility. If you're kind of towards the end of the draft here, where I'm at, it gets a little dicey. You got to actually kind of play your cards. I mean, are you going to reach and take a guy like Patrick Mahomes, or are you going to let it slide and maybe hope that you get a guy like, I don't know, Cam Ward, Baker, Kyler coming back to you?
Yeah, and I'm just going to go ahead and set this player for Lamar here because I just didn't want to have an auto draft. Lamar probably would have got picked anyway, but I just wanted to make sure we didn't get an auto draft there. But yeah, I mean, I think, the QB anchor thing is a big deal to me. I think, I'm right here at the 106, right? I like Jalen Hurts, but like in a situation like this, Hurts is in like a separate tier from for me. The first tier is like pretty much here, and then it's like Burrow and Jalen and Justin Herbert, pretty much. Those three in that tier. But in this situation, I'll go Justin Jefferson here. I like Jalen Hurts. I think he's going to be good for fantasy, but being in the 106 spot, I'm banking on the fact that I could likely land a Drake May as my QB1, a Bo Nix, maybe a Jordan Love, and I'm comfortable with that because of just the difference you're getting with Jefferson compared to the rest of the guys at the position. Even inside the top 10, he's going to be a huge separator on an average points per game basis. Then, maybe Jalen Hurts will be till, to the next quarterback below him, maybe like a Justin Herbert or, whoever may be. But you're up here at the 111. We do see Brock Bowers go in the first round. I mean, it is a tight end premium, and I've seen Bowers go a lot of times inside inside the top inside the first round. And then obviously with a tight end premium, he goes here. You go Malik Neighbors. Tell us what you're thinking here before you make your second selection here at the 202.
Yeah, it's pretty easy for me. Might be controversial to some, but Malik Neighbors is the wide receiver one in Dynasty to me. I think he proved that much last year. I know Chase and Jefferson are both really good, so don't hear what I'm not saying. I think they're the same tier. So I like Neighbors in this situation where now I can come back. I can either take Ashton Genty if I want the running back. I also have Patrick Mahomes there if I want to have a pretty stable quarterback and just let myself go forward and see what the board has fall back to me. And I think that's the route I'm going to go. I mean, this is a mock, so we'll see what happens. But I love the start of a Neighbors Mahomes build because that feels really safe.
Yeah, as crazy as it sounds, I've stayed away from Mahomes a lot in these. Even in Superflex in general. It's not necessarily that I don't like Mahomes. I just for fantasy, he's been so frustrating. That offense feels so balanced. It feels like almost not Tom Brady esque, but like where he's just leaning on the defense. They don't feel like this splash kind of offense. And maybe that changes, right? Because, we saw how things kind of happened for them last year. They lacked explosiveness on the offensive side of the ball. They really lacked a run game too. And that's the scary thing is their running game was so bad and it still didn't, help from a Mahomes standpoint where they were just throwing the football a ton and they did not run the football a lot last year. So that concerns me where they were a pass heavy team and he still wasn't extremely successful. Now they did have their injuries and unfortunate, that Hollywood Brown got hurt, the O-line shuffled around. Pacheco obviously wasn't the same guy, but they don't really add an explosive running back to that room. So maybe that bodes well for Mahomes and maybe they continue to be that high passing offense, but maybe they can get back to being a little bit more explosive with Hollywood Brown, with Rashee Rice coming back. Maybe they can trend in that direction.
Yeah, I like that pick for you here at Herbert, by the way. But just real quick on Mahomes, I mean, he's never been a top 12 quarterback. So I just feel like we kind of overreact a little bit to what happened and what he might be going forward. Like you mentioned, there were some injuries, changes in the offense. So we'll see if that develops as we go forward. But, I like your Herbert pick here, Pete. So you want to talk about that a little bit? Let us know what your thoughts were. I know you were talking about Bo Nix coming back to you, but I really like Herbert Jefferson as a build.
That's kind of my thing, right? Like when you look at like I get Jefferson and I really don't find, Jefferson to be far off from Hurts or Mahomes. Not Jefferson, Herbert. And truthfully, I do prefer Herbert over Mahomes in Dynasty just because of what he does with his legs. But look, Mahomes runs with his legs too. I just I don't know. I don't think there's going to be too far off from a points per game perspective from him and Mahomes. So getting him there feels pretty comfortable. I didn't expect to get Herbert there. I expected him to go a little bit higher up. But you see a lot of teams in this scenario where they're just building on a lot of stacks, right? I feel like a couple of years ago when, like a year, even 2 years ago, it was so popular to go quarterback with your first two picks. But now we're seeing so many people going and taking double position players, right? And kicking the quarterback can slightly down the road, and there's also just a lot more depth. There's a lot of young guys that have legs, right? Drake May goes at the 302 here, right? That's not that crazy to see that happen sometimes, right? And he's got legs, right? And you look at all the quarterbacks that are still left. I mean, you could even love JJ McCarthy, Matt, and JJ McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in drafts where he goes in the fifth round, right? Like fifth, even sometimes sixth, right? Depending on the draft. So yeah, I mean, I'm all about like, getting a QB anchor, right? You could even consider Herbert to me or Mahomes QB anchors where, there's stability there. They're going to be in the top 10 pretty much every year. And then, there's not a lot of variance on a points per game basis for these other quarterbacks, like a Brock Purdy compared to, a Dak Prescott or, obviously Dak's down there because of age and so is Goff, but Jared Goff's been
But the production's
top 8.
there.
I know Jared Goff's been what, like well, let me take my pick here, but Goff's been in the top 10 the last 2 years and has been really good, right? So, I don't mind waiting and going after a guy like that later on. Now,
Yeah.
I have 6 seconds here. I'm gonna go with JSN. I struggled there because I kind of wanted Tet, but I'll take JSN. I didn't really get a great look at the running back position. Maybe I would have went Devon A-Chain there, but I guess I'm okay with JSN. Would you have went somewhere else there?
I don't think going JSN's too bad there, to be honest. I think it's a good pick. I
Yeah,
think he's appropriately valued. Achan, you definitely could make that argument if you wanted to hit that quarterback. CJ Stroud's there, your guy Bo Nix is there, so I wouldn't fault you at this point. There's just so many good players, you can't really necessarily go wrong. Um,
sure.
so I like the build. You've got two stable wide receivers. You've got a stable quarterback. We'll see what falls to you in the fourth. I do think it's interesting. You mentioned teams not being afraid to double up on non-quarterbacks. I mean, we see Shocker here who goes 3 wide receivers to start off, and Chase, McConkey, and Marvin Harrison. I mean, there's one thing you can't deny, that wide receiver room is going to be really dang good. And, there's guys like Geno who are going to be available late. So I don't think that necessarily it's a bad move. I think it's just a product of quarterbacks playing longer. And like you mentioned, we have more young guys stepping up and giving us more opportunities.
Yeah, I'm trying to veer away from trying to just go quarterback super heavy. The one thing I will say is in a startup, right, it's the cheapest you're going to get quarterbacks, right? This is the cheapest time you're going to be able to get the quarterbacks. And I mean, to this point, like, okay, Shocker could come back around and get like a Brock Purdy combo, with a Jared Goff, right? And Brock Purdy signs an extension that's going to give him insulation in a Mike Shanahan, a Kyle Shanahan offense, right? Like, so I don't think there's a perfect way. I think when playing in Dynasty and doing these startups, it's important to remember that there's not necessarily a perfect build or this is the blueprint of how you have to do it, right? I mean, some people love building around wide receivers, right? Because, they age better and they're better foundational pieces as where running backs age worse, right? And they lose value much quicker, right? And so, there's just a lot of ways people want to go about it. And then even in the tight end premium, right? Like you'll find people that'll go like a Brock Bowers round 1, and then they'll turn around and try to go like a George Kittle, right? In like the 4th or 5th round, right? And double up there because of the premium. So there's not necessarily a right or wrong way to go about it. I just think, be confident, have a plan, and obviously be willing to adjust. But you go Travis Hunter and CJ Stroud. So you get your second quarterback. You do build around the wide receiver position. No running backs yet for you. Why don't you talk a little bit about, your build so far?
Yeah, sitting there at the 311, I had thoughts of taking a wide receiver or maybe going a running back there. But this is kind of where you play the board. If this were a real draft, I would look and see, Jalen's attorney who picked after me didn't have a quarterback. So there's a good chance I knew he was going to take one. I thought CJ Stroud was a pretty good value there at the 311, so I took him first, hoping that Travis Hunter might fall back to me because you and I have discussed this many times. I'm very comfortable with him. I think he's going to be a really dang good football player. I'm not concerned about how much he's going to play on defense or anything like that. So I like getting Travis Hunter back. I've got 2 wide receivers that I believe in personally that can be big time fantasy playmakers. I've got 2 stable quarterbacks. Now I just got to figure out what I'm going to do at running back. And, I think there's some depth that can fall back, and I'll just see what I can get.
Yeah, absolutely. If you saw me jump there for a second, my cat just.
But we've got.
Sorry, my cat just tried to jump up on my leg and scratch the hell out of me, and she's still trying to come up here. Go ahead, Matt. Run the mock. I'll be right back.
Well, we got Kyler Murray goes off the board next, followed by Baker Mayfield. So we got a quarterback run here. And again, this kind of goes back to what Pete and I were discussing before is these quarterbacks are going to go early. It's the cheapest. You're going to get them. Travion Henderson goes next as Pete's on the clock. I say Travion is the one name that I was debating between him and Hunter. Hunter, I picked him just solely because he's higher in my personal rankings. I think he's a guy that, it might be the cheapest you get him right now. And that's crazy to say because he's a guy going at the 102, 103 range.
Yeah, Henderson goes off the board, and obviously, me and you were both like very high on him this process, and I happen to really like the draft. I don't really, people seem to not really be in love with the landing spot, and I get it. I think we wanted a Bears landing spot, right, paired up with Ben Johnson. Right, if we could redo that Luther Burden Henderson landing spots, we definitely would. But I'm good with Henderson there. I think I prefer Jonathan Taylor still ahead of Henderson. I think that's pretty comfortable though. After Jonathan Taylor, I think you can make the argument of Henderson over pretty much all the other running backs on the board. Josh Jacobs is a little bit older, right? And I feel like he's going to be more volume dependent than Jonathan Taylor will, but Josh Jacobs is going to play in a more friendly offense where Taylor's going to be playing with Richardson. I take Taylor here. Jonathan Taylor, 1,400 yards in an offense that I mean, wasn't very good, and he had 1,400 yards in 14 games last year. I feel like Jonathan Taylor had the quietest 1,400 yard season that I can remember, Matt. I mean, I feel like everybody, like, I feel like when we look back at last year, we don't really feel like Jonathan Taylor was a success. He was the RB12 last year with 1,400 yards. He had 12 total touchdowns. Um, it's probably more so because of the missed games. Again, he played 14, and he has missed a lot of games, right? I mean, in his career, he's missed the first two. He's played one full season in 2021, then 11, 10, and 14. He was 17.6, which was seventh in points per game last year. I think a lot of people look at Jonathan Taylor that he burned them in that one game. Was it against Denver? Or I don't remember what it was, but there was one game down the stretch in the playoffs. It might have been the semis or the first round of the playoffs where he just had a really bad fantasy outing. And I feel like that kind of soured people on his total season as a whole.
Yeah, well, he had that late bye week in week 14, so I remember
Mm-hmm.
that was tough depending on your league and making the playoffs. But I think you're right. It was a really quiet season. I mean, he finished as RB12. Can you knock him for that? Maybe a little, but at the same time, he only had 18 catches, and I certainly could see that have some positive regression.
Yeah.
If he gets a couple more targets, a couple more dinks, he only had one receiving touchdown, so 136 yards. We've seen him take a screen to the house, so it wouldn't surprise me if he certainly improved on that number going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a tough spot for me. It's one of those how far do you push the quarterback envelope, right? I don't really mind some of these quarterbacks, but there is the possibility you have a guy without a quarterback here, a couple guys that could use a second quarterback. So I'm just going to go ahead and take the quarterback. I have a quarterback in Herbert that it feels like he's got the upside and a good floor. I could go Trevor Lawrence, I could go Dak. I know you're gonna cringe at me, but I'm gonna actually go Michael Penix, right? Get some extra youth. I was thinking about going with Dak there just because um, I really think Dak is super underrated. But I'll go with Penix. Ironically, I say the youth, but Penix is decently old for a quarterback in his second year. But I'll take a chance on him because him and Dak both have similar mobility, right? I expect Penix, his defense not to be very good. They both play in domes. So I'll take the shot on a guy who's a little bit younger, but has somewhat of a similar skill set, to Dak Prescott. So I was thinking Trevor Lawrence. I'm sure that probably would have been the pick for you there because I know you're a big believer in Trevor Lawrence, but I just couldn't take myself to do it.
Yeah, I'm definitely the number one fan of the Trevor Lawrence fan club. If Coach were here, he'd be roasting me for that. But sitting here at this pick, it kind of worked out great for me. I mean, looking at the board, Derrick Henry goes, certainly a great win now. Running back, Devontae Smith, Hoffman here takes McLaurin, and that leaves me to get my first running back, and that's going to be Kyren Williams. And I feel really good about that. I think it's a great short term play. Does it work out in the long? We've been debating back and forth in our group chats of what is LA doing with the running back position. But all I know for right now is Kyren Williams is going to be a solid pick for me.
Yeah, we talked about the Jarquez Hunter thing, right? And I think it's a good segue into the Kyren Williams thing, right? I mean, there was a report that just came out today that there's healthy discussion between Kyren Williams and the Rams for an extension. Look, is there a possibility in a world where McVay, it becomes a little bit more of an outlier where he veers off of his consistency to go towards one back? Yes. I know you're going to tell me that, you feel like it's kind of not the full story of the McVay offense where he features, one running back. But since Kyron's been there, he's gotten the majority. He was number one in opportunity share last year. And so I guess I would ask you because, and you're taking your pick. So, I want you to obviously have a clear head while picking, but while you're picking, explain to me, you take Kyren Williams there. I know you like RJ Harvey. I think you'd like Kaleb Johnson. Why Kyren Williams there? If you do have concern, if you like Jarquez Hunter, talk to Kyren Williams dynasty owners at least, and kind of maybe try to calm their nerves down, or maybe just be fair and honest and say, hey, look, maybe Kyren, you're looking to compete this year, and maybe you feel confident that Kyren can do that and give you at least one really strong year, and maybe you look at him as a guy that you could maybe flip after. What's the thought process there? Only because I know you are a big believer in Jarquez Hunter.
Yeah, I think you hit it there in the head and the latter. I'm very confident in that he can provide me production right now, and he'll provide production for someone next year. Whether that's going to be actually in LA, I don't know. I won't say for certain, but what I do know is that he's going to go somewhere and have some sort of role. So I'm happy to draft him, use him for 1 year, or evaluate what I need to do and then move him in the future. Um, I thought about taking RJ Harvey with that second pick because I do need another running back. But I do think if you look at the board here, this is a tight end premium league. We've got lots of tight ends on the board that are still available. Sam Laporta's there, Tyler Warren's there, TJ Hawkinson's there. I took Colston Loveland. That's solely because of my conviction for Loveland. I think that he has the ability to rise up tight end rankings and hit tight end 3. I think Laporta might be the better play right now. But long-term build, which is kind of how I'm building this team. I mean, this is pretty youthful other than Kyren Williams and Patrick Mahomes. And not to say that they're old because they've got certainly some years that they can play. But I just think Loveland has the ability to be really dang good. He's only 21 years old. You've heard me talk about him enough, so I'll let you make your pick.
Yeah, I'm running out of time here. I certainly am running out of time here. I'm gonna go with Kaleb Johnson. I've talked at nauseum about Johnson. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to give a high floor. But maybe not the highest ceiling until we get that quarterback situation figured out. Look, if Aaron Rodgers comes in, maybe he is calling a lot of the shots, right? But I look at Pittsburgh. I just don't really feel like I'm seeing, or I'm not. There's not a lot of confidence that I have that offense is just magically going to be really good. My thought process here with Kaleb Johnson, at least, is I like the veterans here. I like Alvin Kamara if I can squeeze him and get lucky on the way back. Where Kamara, I think, can have high upside for this year, where Johnson can be a safe floor play. Maybe that offense gets better. Maybe they draft a quarterback next year. So that's why I go Johnson there. I did think about going Laporta. I do like your Loveland pick. I think there's a lot of veteran tight ends that you can get in Dynasty later. And so you can pair it up with a guy like Loveland, who, look, if Loveland doesn't have an awesome year one, there are guys that I know we both like. Evan Ingram is like the tight end 17, like in Dynasty startups, right? Like you could go swing on him or David Njoku, who are guys that you can pretty much expect to give you, a good season, at least one, right? That you can pair up with Loveland, where maybe Loveland doesn't hit this year, but those guys can give you production. So I like the Loveland pick. I'm fine with it. I'm surprised, you took him over Laporta. But he does get Laporta's offensive coordinator and Ben Johnson. So I'm assuming maybe that has something to do with it. But can you talk about that a little bit again?
Yeah, I just think in my personal rankings, I have Loveland ahead of Laporta. I think that's going to be crazy to some people because Loveland's never played it down. But I've been pretty high on Loveland for a long time. I think that the landing spot shouldn't be viewed negatively. I mean, yes, he goes to Chicago. It's a crowded offense, but I mean, they lost Keenan Allen. Is Rome Odunze going to step up? I believe that he can, but will he? I don't know. But they drafted him 10th overall, and they drafted him 10th overall for a reason. He's a really dang good football player. I already mentioned he's only 21 years old, so he's got a ton of growth to still have. If you go back and watch his production at Michigan, he's not going to have the numbers that you saw from like Tyler Warren this past year, but the play on the field is what matters. They did not throw the ball at Michigan like they did at Penn State, where he was doing everything. So I just think that there's a really, really high ceiling for Colston Loveland. If you prefer Laporta over him, I'm not going to fault you too much. I think they're pretty dang close, probably in the same tier for me. But I just lean Loveland if I had to pick between the two of them. But I do want to get your thoughts, Pete. I mean, we see one build here with the first pick overall where Josh Allen goes. He also takes Brock Purdy in the 4th round, but he goes running back heavy with Barkley, Irving, and Chase Brown. Gets his first 2 wide receivers in Zay Flowers, Tyreek Hill. Pretty volatile build there at the wide receiver position. Probably going to need to just hammer wide receiver as we go forward just because he doesn't have those star players there. would you be concerned if Tyreek Hill was your wide receiver too, or are you comfortable with that build, especially given that this is a win now team?
Yeah, this is. I think. Look, this is the problem. I think in this situation, I think you get a little too greedy at the running back position. You have two studs here. If it were me personally, I would have taken a shot on one of these receivers, like T. Higgins, like Devonta. I prefer those guys over Terry. I even would prefer a Dunze over Flowers and Worthy. There is some concern there, right? I mean, Zay Flowers is in an offense that's not heavy pass heavy, right? You have two volatile wide receivers where we just don't really know what's going on with Tyreek Hill, right? And I mean, I don't think it's a bad build. I think it's a boom bust build. Like he has two wide receivers that can take a ball and go 90 yards on any play, and he's got awesome quarterbacks and awesome running backs. I just think we got a little bit too greedy there at the running back position. I don't know if you feel the same, but if it were me, there's just a lot of veteran running backs. Like to me, Chase Brown, you could have got Alvin Kamara here, and I know not everybody's as high on Kamara as maybe I am, but with Barkley and Irving, you get a young running back here in Irving. You get a little bit of an older running back, but a guy that's going to help you compete year one. I just don't think you needed Chase Brown. But that's just me. Do you agree with that, or are you good with the build?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting build. It's different than what I would do,
Yeah,
but it's one that I could see paying off. Like if you told me somehow this guy snuck in and the draft, but if that team worked out, I wouldn't think it's that crazy because you mentioned it. You got two wide receivers that can take it to the house from 90 yards. So it's just different. It's not one that I would typically do, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad move. I
sure.
mean, looking across the board, I think a lot of these teams are pretty strong. I mean, everyone's drafted fairly well, in my opinion. I don't see any necessarily crazy picks. Do you?
Um,
I mean, I might say Hoff is crazy just because I want to.
yeah, I mean Hoff, but honestly, I mean Hoff getting Goff here, like he's got a team that can help him win for sure this year. If
Mhm.
Goff can be Goff and give you a top 10 season, his team's fine, right? I mean, you go out and get a Matt Stafford for safety for Tua, right? And you're feeling pretty good about this team. Maybe not at the quarterback position, and that's a tough position to acquire talent at, but definitely a team that can help you win now. So I'm not upset about it. I guess if I'm trying to look on the board here and trying to, I guess, find a pick that is maybe a little puzzling. I don't see one just yet, but you're on the board, so why don't you tell me about what you're thinking, and let me see if there's anything specific that stands out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm stuck here. I go with David Montgomery. Not necessarily my favorite pick. I kind of ran out of time. I was too busy diving through these quarterbacks that are available.
Mhm.
I did need a second running back. I would be interested in going Cam Scattaboo. In hindsight, I might have gone that route. Some of these wide receivers are interesting to me. And if someone doesn't go right here, we'll see what happens with Jalen's attorney. So who he takes. But there's some names that I think are interesting, and one specifically that I probably would expect to have gone earlier, just because of the name value associated with him. That's going to be Jaylen Waddle. I mean,
I
that's
was
kind of
just gonna, I was gonna
Madison
say
on there. I
Waddle.
think, yeah, I just think that's kind of I'm not known as a Waddle hater. I think that it's probably justifiable for me to say that. But just at this point, it just feels like a value, in my opinion. Um, I might do that just because of my conviction in JJ McCarthy. But I do think that you could definitely make a case for Jaylen Waddle here too.
Yeah, I'm with you. So ironically, Matt, it's usually my Wi-Fi that's bad, but I actually have the ability to see how many bars you have compared to me, and your Wi-Fi is actually bad right now. So why don't
Ooh,
do you want to try dropping out and coming back in, and seeing if that helps?
sure. Am I cutting out?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, you're freezing up. I think the audience might think that there was a weird pause there. But yeah, go for it, and then we'll grab Connor's question and then come back in. So while we wait for Matt, yeah, I think Matt makes a good point on Jaylen Waddle. I think Waddle is a pretty good value. I'm here on the board, right? I don't have a tight end here. I'm not necessarily going to reach on any of these guys. If there was a guy in this area, I like Tucker Kraft and Njoku. Um, I could use another wide receiver. This is a start 3 wide receiver league, so that's likely the route that I'm looking to go here. Out of these guys, look. I'm going to go with, and this is kind of surprising for me, but I'm going to go with Luther Burden. Reason being is I have two very, very high upside guys with Justin Jefferson and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Those guys are going to provide a really, really strong floor and ceiling, a really high floor. And I can take the chance on Luther Burden not panning out because there's some veterans, right, that I don't mind taking chances on. Like maybe I take a swing here on Devontae Adams on the way back, right? Or maybe you take a chance on a Deebo Samuel, right? You go for, maybe a third wide receiver who can give you a decent floor. This third wide receiver spot, when you have two receivers like this, it's not that it's not important, but there can be interchangeable risky players where, you can find a guy that's going to give me maybe 10 points on a weekly basis. And that's fine to take a chance on. So I'll take Luther Burden just because I have two really strong wide receivers. Now, if he was my wide receiver 2, I probably would have went like a Ricky Pearsall, maybe someone who I think is more safe. But I'll take Luther Burden here as my wide receiver 3, just in that regard. Now, Matt, your connection is better. You have 3 bars now, so that's a plus. I didn't get to Connor's question because I was waiting for you to come back, but Connor said 12-team, 1 quarterback, half PPR, no tight end premium. He said trade Kyle Pitts and Javonte Williams for TJ Hawkinson. Yeah, I mean that's a pretty big no-brainer for me. I would say Javonte Williams. I think Javonte can have a solid season, but he doesn't have much value long term. And we've seen Dallas, when they're not getting what they want out of a running back, they're quick to move on to another player, especially these veterans that they don't have high draft capital in. So I'm fine with this, and really it's really Kyle Pitts for TJ Hawkinson, and that's a no brainer for me. Javonte's a nice toss in, but
Well said.
I'd be clicking that pretty quick.
That's a slam accept for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
It's in this
did you want to add to that, or is that pretty straightforward for you?
Yeah, I think TJ Hawkinson's being slept on, man, here. I would absolutely take TJ Hawkinson in this deal. I do want to mention that it kind of shows here in the rankings, too. If you pull up the tight ends, you'll see Kyle Pitts is ranked ahead of Tucker Kraft. Can anybody explain that to me? I don't understand it. Love for Kyle Pitts has gone on too long. Tucker Kraft has been criminally underrated. I mean, he's provided more fantasy production last year alone than Kyle Pitts has really done the last 3 years. He finished tied in 10. He had 70 targets, 50 catches, 707 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And I think he can get better. He's still young. He's still getting better. He's attached to Jordan Love.
I'm with you there. I don't really know understand the infatuation. Look, if Kyle Pitts hits, I'm happy to be wrong. By the way, Devontae Adams goes, and that was my next pick. So kind of a bummer there. But yeah, if Kyle Pitts hits, I'm happy to be wrong. That's a guy that, if I miss out on him being really good, fine. I could definitely use him with a Penix stack, but I'm not super. I'm not pushing stacks in Dynasty unless they're elite stacks. Otherwise, I'm just taking the best player in the tier. And in this situation, I'm pretty good at running back. I have two. I have youth here with Kaleb. I have Jonathan Taylor and Kamara who are going to help me win now. My quarterbacks are good. I'm pretty much in a situation where I can pretty much take best player on the board that's available. I'm going to go with Tucker Kraft. I don't know if he's going to make it back to me. It's the position that I haven't drafted just yet. I'm with you, Matt. I like Tucker Kraft. He was in the top 10, I believe, in touchdowns last year at the tight end position and receiving yards, while also being like outside of the top 15 in receptions. So to me, I'm cool with that. I'll take Tucker Kraft here for the upside. And then if you want to make a comment on that, or we can move on. There was a comment from Tyler here asking about the about pretty much Ayuk and why you prefer Burden over Ayuk. So, do you want to add anything to the Tucker Kraft thing, or should we move on?
Yeah, we can move on. I think we're good.
Okay. Yeah, Tyler said, why burden over players like Ayuk, just upside? Yeah, I think based on my build with Jefferson, with Jackson Smith and Jigba, right? Like the floor is very scary for Luther Burden, right? I think that's valid, but the ceiling is very high. And in this build specifically with Jefferson, with JSN, I have two receivers that have extremely high ceilings and very high floors that I can take a chance on my wide receiver being a position that's rotated in and out. You can find guys that are going to give you 10 points, 12 points every week. And with how high these guys are going to score above the average player at the position, they're going to make up for a deficient wide receiver 3 if Burden doesn't work out. Where Ayuk, I just don't know what his ceiling is anymore. I think Ayuk's ceiling is, I don't know, a top 20 wide receiver at this point in fantasy. And I think that's his ceiling. I don't see him being a wide receiver 1 anymore. I could absolutely be wrong, but I just don't really see it. I'm worried about the injury. I'm worried about the pieces in that offense. And I'd much rather own Ricky Pearsall over Brandon Ayuk, who actually goes back to back in this draft.
That's what I was going to mention. It's interesting that they go back to back. But I'm with you on where you said Ayuk not necessarily being a wide receiver 1 going forward. I just don't think that's necessarily in the cards. This is the new look 49ers. We'll see what happens. But I do want to mention, this is interesting that this draft, we just had our first team take 3 quarterbacks from best I can tell. I don't think that's necessarily how a draft would unfold, in my opinion. Because here I am, Hoff's about to have an auto pick, and it's going to be my turn to pick. If I was in a true draft, this is where I would be taking a quarterback because the value is just too strong that it's going to be worth a ton going forward. There's going to be a lot of teams that will take 3. I've even seen teams that take 4 quarterbacks early just because you can use those as trade bait. You can use them later on. Heck, you can even keep them if you draft right. So I think this is the interesting point of mocks where it's not necessarily as it would be in real life if we were drafting and putting money on these teams. But now that I'm back on the clock, I'm lacking 2 flexes. So I'm torn between taking a guy like Godwin, maybe Jayden Reed. I could go James Conner. I think that's pretty strong. But I'm going to stick with what I was just preaching. I think I'm really torn, man. I guess
You
this
could go
doesn't matter. It's
quarterback.
fake.
Yeah, you could go quarterback. You're going to get two picks here. So, you could realistically, yeah, you could go with a player like Coleman and maybe take a quarterback on the way back. I'll be honest with you. Like, if I'm thinking from my strategy with my team, like, I'm hoping that Matt Stafford comes back to me or Geno. I actually happen to prefer kind of both those guys over Darnold. I guess I would take Darnold if I had, you know, if I had like a Tua, maybe I would take Darnold because I need a little bit of a younger player. But in this scenario, and Stafford does go off the board, I just think Matt Stafford's extension, his arm still looks good. He's got pop in it. He's going to give you another 2 to 3 years, and if he's your third quarterback, that's more than enough. It's hard to do much better than that unless you're drafting 3 quarterbacks very high. So yeah, and you take Geno there, which is totally fine. I worry about that Darnold landing spot. Do you have concern about that too? That offensive line was pretty bad last year, and we saw Darnold under pressure with in the playoffs last year, and we've also saw it with that Lions game before the playoffs, and then we saw it with the Jets. Is there concern there at all for you?
Oh, there's absolutely concern, in my opinion. You mentioned the pressure. If you go look at those tackles, they kind of struggled against some that division too, it got tough. Go look at what the 49ers did. They drafted what feels like 59 defensive linemen. So I think that they're going to have to anchor down because Sam Darnold needs that time. He needs to have the ability to process in the pocket and deliver clean throws in a clean pocket. And if he can't do that, it's going to struggle. It's also a completely different wide receiver room. It's time for JSN to step up. I think so, but it does need to be acknowledged that they lost Tyler Lockett, that they lost DK Metcalf. So it's just going to be different in Seattle. So I do have similar concerns. I would probably chase a guy like Geno over Sam Darnold because it wouldn't surprise me if Sam Darnold has a short lease and they go try Milrow if all things are going wrong or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think there's not a ton of guaranteed money on that deal. They have the ability to move off him if they wanted to. Now, what are your thoughts on Jayden Reed? I take Jayden Reed here at the 10:07. I think it's a fair spot for him. There are guys I thought about Jack Besh. I don't think Godwin fits my build unless, I'm looking at him as like, hey, this is a safe veteran in case Burden doesn't work out. He's going to give me a good floor. I think Jayden Reed and Burden are kind of riskier players that don't have high floors, but both of them I'm okay with being at that wide receiver 3 position for me, because if one of them hits, right now I have 2 stud wide receivers, 1 elite. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on Jayden Reed? I mean, it seems like everyone's kind of out on him. I'm not necessarily in love with him, but every player, a lot of these guys come at a price, and at this cost for him, I'm okay taking a chance here.
Yeah, I think Jayden Reed is kind of what he is. He's a gadget, you know, be used in motion, be moved across the field and make plays. So I like Jayden Reed. He was the guy we predicted to be the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay last season. Did it matter? No, not necessarily. It was a down year, but I do think he has value going forward. I mean, last 2 years ago, he was wide receiver 25. This past year, he was wide receiver 29. There's value in getting a guy that can finish as a wide receiver 3 or 4. In this case, a high wide receiver 3, and you're getting him in the 10th round? I mean, that's great value.
Yeah, I think Reed's going to be involved in the offense, which is they're going to be manufacturing touches for him. They're going to make it a point to get him involved. Outside of Matthew Golden, who I think should be the wide receiver 1 in this offense, unless he doesn't develop the way that some expect him to. Outside of that, I mean, Dontavian Wicks, we know what he is, right? He's a good route runner, bad hands, inconsistent. Romeo Dobbs is a chain mover. He's a good possession guy who's going to just move the chains and be there for a couple catches a game when you need it in the clutch. But Jayden Reed is a guy who, the upside is there, man. He's, like you said, though, he's a gadgety player. He doesn't have a really strong route tree, and that's kind of concerning. But yeah, I don't mind getting some exposure there. Now, 3 tight ends go off the board here, which, there are runs that happen. We talk about, talking about Jayden Reed, who I don't love. I mean, Kyle Pitts is now here on the board behind all of these guys, and it is tempting. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's not. I don't mind taking maybe a chance on Isaiah Likely, but I have Tucker Kraft. I'm okay taking a chance on Ferguson, so I'm still not going to reach, even though it's premium here. But that's kind of interesting. I also want to talk about the running backs that are left here, Matt. I mean, Tyrone Tracy, I don't care for. I like Charbonnet and I like Trey Benson. And I'm looking at a team that I have that's young, and it's like, do I take a chance on Charbonnet or do I take a chance on Benson? Benson Walker could come back, whereas Connor also gets an extension. I'm gonna go with Charbonnet just because I've seen him do it, right? And there's a world where Walker walks. He's in a walk year where James Conner did get extended, but I do really like Trey Benson as well. But I'll take Charbonnet over Benson, 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, and Benson has the youth. Connor's getting older, so I think that's something to consider there. You take Charbonnet, I'm not going to fault you too much. I mean, we're talking about 11th round pick.
Yeah.
He's your RB4 on your team, so a lot of these guys are kind of in that handcuff range, anyways. I do want to comment. You mentioned the three tight ends go back to back to back, and Kyle Pitts is still on the board. You have Michael Penix, so you could have gone the stack route if that's what's
Yeah.
important to you. I'm here to tell you that doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
But to each their own. That's
Elite
important for me.
stacks. If you're telling me Burrow, and Higgins, because you're
Sure.
never getting Burrow and Chase in a startup unless you're trading. If you tell me Burrow and Higgins, okay, fine. If you're telling me, you're not taking JJ McCarthy because you have Justin Jefferson. That would be foolish too. But let me pull this question up from Brent here, Matt, as you're getting ready to pick, and let's answer this for him. He said, "Would you guys trade Zay Flowers and a 26 late first for Higgins or Hunter? 10-man league, chasing upside. I'm deep at wide receiver. Flowers is currently my second flex spot. It's a start 2 wide receiver, 2 flex." This is actually kind of funny. I say that because when we talk about how Hunter can succeed as the wide receiver 2 in his offense, it's pretty much how T. Higgins has succeeded as the wide receiver 2 in his offense next to Chase, right? And Hunter's next to BTJ. I'm going to go with Higgins. I probably know your answer. I will go with Higgins because of just the sheer fact that I've seen it done and the upside is there. He was 4th in points per game last year. My biggest concern with Higgins is the health. If Higgins can stay healthy, this is a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy, very likely this season, but it's really about how can he stay on the field. What are your thoughts? I'm either way. I'm fine trading for either of these guys. If you're giving up Flowers in a late first, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I'm going to go Hunter. I think when you're taking Travis Hunter, you're getting a top 10 fantasy wide receiver in Dynasty, in my opinion, right now.
Sure.
What's T. Higgins? He's probably top 15, 16, somewhere in that range. Zay Flowers is more around 24. So would I move wide receiver 24 in a late 26 first to go get the top 10 fantasy wide receiver? Absolutely, I will. If you prefer Higgins over Hunter and you're a little bit scared of what production might look like, do it. That's fine. I don't hate that either. That's the route I would go. I think there's more value there. There's more upside. Yeah, we can talk about him being a wide receiver 2 in Jacksonville, but like you mentioned, there's a world where he can finish really high. We've seen multiple teams, multiple times finish with 2 wide receivers in the top 12, and I am on the clock, and I just now realized. Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't want to cut you off
Let
there.
me find something. Let me find something to pick really quick. Oh no, I'm gonna run out of time. Oh no. Oh well, that's fine. We're gonna go Trey Benson just because that's
There you
all
go.
I could get to.
That's
Um,
fair.
so take my first
Um,
handcuff running back
Now,
there.
is there a world where is that too much, right? Kronster says, I go for Higgins, but try and get a 27 second just to see if you can. Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Like if you could try to get something kicked back, a lot of times you go 2 years out in the future, right? Like, I don't really love making picks like that the main part of the deal, but if you can get something added on top, that starts to add up, right? So yeah, I'm fine with trying to have a second thrown on in 2027. I don't know that you can get that done. And I also, your trade partner the best,
I,
you know. Go.
I would be remiss too if I didn't mention that this is kind of coach's strategy where
I know.
he takes and asks for a random third in the future. So go get that pick if you can.
Yeah, your trade partner is usually the best unless it's in a league with random people. If you don't think it's going to, it's if you're going back and forth and like that's when it's kind of like okay, look, like you're asking for too much. If you like the deal, don't let a second or a little extra pick on top later on be what holds up the deal, right? Try to get something even if it's a third, but if you think that it's going to sour conversations, because look, I'll be honest with you, there are times where I don't trade with people because we're either super far in the initial offer, and it's such a low ball that I just know I'm like I'm not prepared to argue and go. Oh, you take Kyle Williams. I like that. I'm not prepared to argue and sit and go back and forth and have you nickel and dime me. But if you don't think if you're early in the conversations and you don't think it's gonna be something that sours a deal, I don't mind asking possibly for a little bit more.
Yeah. I think you got to know your trade partners, like you mentioned. Don't go in there. And I'm the same as you. If I get a really bad offer that's sent to me, I'm less likely to say, "Oh, let me take my time and see if I can negotiate with you for an hour." So when I send an offer, I try to send one that I think is fair and reasonable. Maybe I'm caught up in Dynasty a lot, so it's easier for me to just kind of hit decline on some things, and maybe I could counter back. But for the most part, if I see a deal I think I can work off, I'll respond to it. But if it's something where then I'll just decline it and move on.
Yeah, and by the way, Brent said for further context, offer with Higgins has Taj Brooks with him, and I have Chase Brown. So he would be getting Higgins, and he has Chase Brown, and would get Taj Brooks as a handcuff to Chase Brown. Does that matter to you at all? I don't think Taj Brooks is going to be enough of a factor to tip you to take him over Hunter if you prefer Hunter. But I would say that Chase Brown is not someone. I'm not also not doing the deal because of Chase Brown either, because we've seen this offense. They're going to throw the football. T. Higgins is going to get his. I'm more worried about Chase Brown than I am worried about T. Higgins.
Yeah, totally agree. I think if I'm picking between the two, yeah, I want Travis Hunter. If this is the T Higgins deal, let's say that's the only one on the table, and you're getting Taj Brooks, I'd be interested in that. I mean, you and I both have spoke extensively this entire offseason about what Taj Brooks could be in this Bengals offense, and I think there is a role and there is value for him. So if you're telling me that you add him, you're the Chase Brown owner, yeah, you're going to have two guys from the same team, but we're talking about an elite offense. So that doesn't necessarily matter. We're not talking about a running back on a bad team with a bad quarterback and a bad wide receiver. We're talking about a team that's going to score a ton of points, assuming Joe Burrow stays healthy and all goes as planned. So, like you said, it's not going to swing the needle for me on picking between the two wide receivers. But if you told me I'm getting a fourth round pick and Taj Brooks thrown in, okay, that's fine with me. But I do love Taj Brooks.
Yeah. No, I'm picking up what you're putting down. Now, by the way, guys, if you are here, we appreciate it. This is our second live stream of, for the channel overall. Matt and the Mediators will be back on Wednesday to do their usual, buy sells for Dynasty. So obviously come out and support for that. We would appreciate it. And then obviously, Hoff is also going to be back with me. We're going to start doing some regular content, right? And getting things going. But we appreciate the support early on in the podcast as we start to build this thing out. I do want to ask if you guys can hit that like button. It would be much appreciated. We have 15 people watching on YouTube. And we have 7 likes. So if you could go ahead and hit that thumbs up, it helps the algorithm. It's going to help us grow as we are a smaller channel, as we're trying to build this thing out. It would help us out tremendously in the early stages. But enough of that. Let's talk about my last pick. And actually, let's talk about your last pick because I like it more than mine. You take Kyle Williams from New England. I absolutely love the pick. I love where Kyle Williams is valued right now in startups. I actually just took him for context in the 10th round of a startup an hour and a half ago. I just took Kyle Williams in the 10th round of a startup an hour and a half ago. So I think this is great value. I reached on Kyle Williams a little bit, but based on what was on the board, I took him over guys like Godwin. I took him over Myers. I took him over Samuel. I took him over Ridley. I took him over Kupp. Like I took him over all of those players, including Michael Pittman and Jayden Higgins. So just a little bit of context there, but tell me about Kyle Williams. I mean, is that a guy that you feel super confident about? Like, what are your thoughts on him?
I, I think the capital of the Patriots is the biggest thing to watch. I say a lot that I follow the transactions of the NFL, and the Patriots have been dying to find a wide receiver. Let's not forget they drafted multiple last year, and it didn't necessarily work out. And they come back this year and they do it again. They draft Kyle Williams decently high, and I think Kyle Williams has a chance to be really good. If you go back watch his tape at Washington State, the man is a demon running across the middle. It's just like no one can catch him. Is the 40 time reflective of that? No, not necessarily, but just go throw the tape in, man. You watch him get the ball in his hands, and the dude is electric. So I love Kyle Williams. I like the opportunity for him to be the guy to grow with Drake May. Now, obviously, we had the news with Stephon Diggs having a good time this past week, and does that give him more opportunity? I don't know. We'll have to see. But what I do know is Kyle Williams is a pretty dang good football team, or excuse me, a good football player. This team went out there and drafted him to assess a need at a position that they're dying for help. So I really like what he can bring to the table. I like what he can do for this offense. And, when I made that pick, I decided since I messed up on the Benson pick, I'm just going to draft rookies. That's all I'm going to do for my next pick. So I'm just going to talk about different rookies since maybe not everyone here on this channel has gotten the opportunity to hear us talk about rookies because we've done some extensive research, lots of video, lots of content on these rookies. So there's several players that I want to talk about. One of them was Tyler Shuck, who went at the 12-11 there. I think he's a guy that's got great value. I mean, Coach and I were screaming that we should be drafting him in the third round of these rookie drafts because he's got the opportunity to start. And here we are, and it looks like he might be the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints.
Oh, fuck me.
Oh, you were on the clock. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I knew I was on the clock, but I really just, I got stuck there. How do I take myself off auto pick now?
Very top. You see it? Turn
Oh
off auto pick.
yeah. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, I get Stevenson. I mean, I went to check. I didn't really love the board where we're at here. This is like wide receiver dead zone to me, in my opinion. Maybe I could have taken another tight end here, but I don't really like the tight ends on the board here. This is really a shitty spot on the board. I guess maybe Ramondre Stevenson was one of the best picks I could have taken because there is a world he's extended. He's still not. I mean, he's not that old. I guess I don't hate it, but this is a really shitty part of the draft. I mean, he's 27, so he's not that young either. This is a really shitty part of the board.
Yeah, this is kind of the part where if we were still having a rookie draft and rookies weren't in there for whatever reason, I would be picking up rookie picks all over the dang place.
Yeah.
I'm back on the board here. Jaden Blue goes to Hoff. I think that's an interesting pick. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of guys here. It's just vets. It's guys that either haven't necessarily proven it. They've got a lot more to do. So I'm going to stick with my strategy. I'm going to draft some rookies. It's probably going to mess up the ADP, but I'm just going to talk about guys that I like and guys that I think that have opportunity. And I'm going to start with one that should be no surprise. And this is going to be a guy that I think could end up with the starting job. I'm going to go ahead and say that. Ja'Cory Cross-Key Merritt. Washington Drake takes him in the 7th round. Yes, a 7th round rookie, but he's competing with Austin Eckler, who is aging and has been injured, and Brian Robinson, who has struggled and he cannot make explosive plays. Very similar to the complaints of Kyren Williams, Ja'Cory Cross-Key Merritt has the ability to be electric. He did not play this past season due to eligibility issues with transferring. Played really solid at New Mexico State. Played at Arizona, really great player. I think he's got the opportunity to be a big-time playmaker. He's electric in space, great with the ball in his hands, can catch the ball out of the backfield. So Ja'Cory Cross-Key Merritt is the name to watch. Pick him up in your 3rd, 4th rounds of your rookie drafts. He might even be on waivers.
Yeah, he absolutely could. We talked about him the other day. I took him. I've taken him in a lot of best ball drafts. I think at this point, right, like at this part of the board, you're really swinging on a lot of the running backs, right, especially rookies. Look, we know what a lot of these guys are. There's hope for Jalen McMillan, maybe. I didn't really hate his season last year. I thought he had a good season. But, Igbukwe gets signed. You extend Godwin. A lot changed. Honestly, I think Wan'Dale Robinson is probably one of my favorite guys. Him and Rashad Bateman. I even don't mind Marvin Mims. I just don't know how consistent he's going to be. But when you talk about upside, I think Mims showed that he has that upside. So maybe you take a chance on him. But if I was taking a safe play here, Wan'Dale Robinson, the dude had what 100 and I don't have the full 140 targets last year.
A million targets.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of yards, but I mean, let's just it's not like he doesn't have like good speed, right, where he can get yards after catch either. I just think that it was a lot of, dink and dunks, right? A lot of crossers for him. But 140 targets, right? It's going to be hard to find a guy at his age this far down at 24 years old, the number 2 in his offense, right? Like you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody at this part of the draft, that has 100+ targets. in the season prior. And I actually don't think you will find anybody here at this point. Maybe Rashid Shaheed probably would have got there, if he never had gotten hurt. In 6 games, he had 41. So, yeah, you could probably project that out to have been at least 100. But, yeah. And then you go Arroyo. Hoff goes Goddard, right? I think tight ends and running backs are probably the 2 positions to start hitting right here. Arroyo, tell the viewers a little bit about him. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think Arroyo is one of those guys who he's really explosive. He finds his way in an offense that doesn't necessarily have a tight end. He's competing with Noah Fant. I'm not concerned about Noah Fant at all. We know what he is. We know what he can be. Elijah Arroyo has elite speed. If you go back and watch, he had that play against Georgia Tech where he runs the seam. Dude hits like 20, absolutely screaming down the seam. So I think he's got the chance to make some plays, be a big time playmaker. I mean, we saw what Sam Darnold did with TJ Hawkins. Develop a relationship. I already mentioned that this team has some wide receiver turnover. Who's going to step up alongside JSN, and I think that Elijah Arroyo could be a benefactor of that. So it's another rookie I'm going to hit here in the 14th round.
Yeah, I'm good with taking a chance on Arroyo. I have him in a couple of leagues as well. Dante does say Darnell Mooney, by the way. That's a good poll here. Darnell Mooney had 106 targets last year. Had a little bit of a slow end to the season. Did have an 82 and a 142 game, but then 20, 27, right, 37. Didn't play week 18, right? I think he left early against Vegas. So yeah, the age is a little bit different though. He is 27, and I don't know if he ended up. Did Darnell Mooney tear his ACL at one point? Did he tear his ACL, Matt? Oh my god! And I got auto
I
pick
don't know if he
again.
tore his ACL.
Fuck.
He definitely had an injury. I don't know if he tore his ACL though. I'll look it up really quick.
All right. Well, I'm cheesily took Devin Neal and swapped my pick so I can get a handcuff to what's his face, Alvin Kamara.
Yeah,
He did, right?
Jarquez Hunter was going to be my final pick. So I got sniped there. So thanks a lot.
There you go. There might be people. There's a good chance. There's a good amount of people that are drafting with us are watching. So if you are, we appreciate that. I don't know if anybody's been talking. No, the chat really hasn't been going off too much actually. But it's a good draft. While we're closing out this draft, Matt, I want you to take a look at the teams. And at the end of this, I'm going to ask you who your favorite team is. So be prepared. And also tell me maybe about the team that you like the least. I'd like to hear that too. So start taking a look there.
Okay.
I'll get ready for my next pick, but yeah, you could go Darnell Mooney for sure. He is the number 2 next to Drake London. I don't think, Bijan Robinson though is also. There's a world where Bijan ends up being the number 2 target getter in this offense. I don't think it's going to happen. He'd have to have 100, but he's got a chance to be somewhere around 80 targets this season. Would not surprise me. But again, Wando Robinson, or I honestly really like Hollywood Brown. We start talking about like how I don't really like that tier we were in just now. I do really like this tier of Wandale, Hollywood, and Christian Kirk. I start to really like them. If I was going to start taking swings at the wide receiver position, that's where I would go. Yeah, Matt, any thoughts? Anything going on through your head? Are you still looking at the teams?
Yeah, I'm looking at the teams, but you mentioned Hollywood Brown. I'm with you there. I think he kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit, maybe.
Yeah.
Is that a product of not necessarily having the hype or the ability to have a high ceiling in Kansas City? Maybe, but I do think that again, there's value in getting these guys that are plug and play flex starters for you. So sometimes we get a little bit too caught up that and we overlook it. So I think it's good value.
Yeah, I actually happen to really, really like Hollywood Brown. I think they had I think they had a big plan for him last year. And when he got hurt, it threw everything out of whack. So you know what? And no, I'm gonna go with Wandale still. Um, because I know for a fact I know Wandale's role in this offense. Rashi Rice coming back, right? There's still a lot of mouths to feed in Kansas City, but that doesn't mean I don't like Hollywood. I do think he's a really good value. I don't know why many people don't care for him. I get he's on a 1 year deal. He's getting older. He came off the injury last year, but I do think it was apparent that they had plans for him last year, and so I think it's a good swing.
Yeah, I think you're right. Let's look at the list here and see who's left. So I got sniped on all my rookies. I got to find another one to pick up here. I think Will Howard's an interesting pick. I mean, the Steelers don't have a quarterback right now, so he's in line to possibly play. Trevor Etienne is out there. Woody Marks is there. So there's a lot of rookies that I like. Elikayo Manor, not necessarily a profile I love, but he does have that big body. He finds his way with Cam Ward. Could he have an opportunity to play? I don't know. Coach and I were talking yesterday. I think another name that we're not necessarily talking about that maybe we should be is Calvin Ridley. What do we do with Calvin Ridley? With a rookie quarterback, I think he's got the opportunity to really produce. He doesn't necessarily have a ton of tread on his tires just because he hasn't had to play as much. He had the suspension and all that. But I'm going to go with Taj, a guy I love. And again, I think he has the opportunity to have a role in this offense in Cincinnati. Chase Brown needs a goal line guy. They need someone to help him. So I'm going to go with Taj Brooks with my final pick.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is kind of a frustrating player, right? I mean, he's coming off back-to-back seasons where he had 1,000 yards. Both seasons he had over 100 targets. I think expectations were really high with him in Jacksonville his first year, and he didn't really produce. I don't know why. Am I tripping? Did he get traded to Jacksonville and then didn't play that season on the suspension? I don't really remember, but
He signed in Jacksonville but didn't play, I believe. I
right.
don't remember
Okay.
if he was traded or not.
Yeah, no, he was. He was
Actually, I think you're
traded.
right. I believe he was traded.
He was. So I don't know. I mean, Ridley, 30 years old. I get it, right? I mean, high draft capital. This is a guy that we all loved at one point in time. But I don't know, man. I find myself shying away from him. But neither here nor there. Let's take a look at the board here. I'm going to go ahead and at least read off my team first. I'm going to pull it up like this just because it's a little bit easier. So I get Justin Herbert. I pair him with Michael Penix at the quarterback position. My running backs here are Taylor, Kaleb Johnson, and then I end up with Alvin Kamara as my RB3, Zach Charbonnet as my RB4, Ramondre Stevenson as my RB5, and I get the handcuff and Devin Neal to Alvin Kamara. Wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, JSN. Little risk there after with Luther Burden and Wan'Dale Robinson, Jayden Reed. Wan'Dale Robinson's a good example of what I was talking about, right? Luther Burden, if him and Jayden Reed don't pan out, Wan'Dale Robinson's going to be a high floor guy that's going to get me 10 points a week in that wide receiver 3 position. If for whatever reason, Burden and Reed are absolute failures, which I don't expect them both to be. But at the tight end position, I take Tuck Kraft, and I get Isaiah Likely as well to pair with him. I don't hate my team. I actually kind of like the build. But let's take a look at your team, Matt. Why don't you go ahead and read that off? You're here in this slot right here. I'll highlight it for you.
Yeah. So for my team, I've got Patrick Mahomes at quarterback with CJ Stroud at Superflex, and then I got Geno Smith on the bench. Running backs got Kyren Williams, David Montgomery, Trey Benson, and then I drafted Ja'Cory Taj Brooks as my rookies that I kind of highlighted there. My wide receivers, I think it's a pretty strong room, in my opinion. Malik Neighbors, Travis Hunter to be the stars there, with Jordan Addison, Keon Coleman, and Kyle Williams coming in. And then at tight end, I'm going to have Colston Loveland and so solid squad. I think if we had the ability to trade and maybe this was a live draft, it would have turned out a little bit different. I'd be looking to move around, but I'm okay with the squad if I had it just like this. I think it's enough to compete right now, but also have the ability to build for the future. It's pretty solid youth at quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end. So some premium positions there.
Yeah, I think your build ends up good. And look, at the end here, you started kind of just going off of trying to make it a little more fun and taking some guys. Obviously, your wide receivers are a little kind of sketchy, but I don't hate it at all. Now you were tasked with finding a team that's built outside of mine and yourself that you really like. Is there a team that that sticks out to you that you really like?
Yeah.
Favorite build?
Let's head on over to the 102. It's Zoko. You see that build? He starts with my guy Jaden Daniels and Drake May as his two quarterbacks. Has solid depth with Sam Darnold and Tyler Shuck, so lots to work with there at the quarterback position. He's going to have the ability to trade a guy if he needs, flexibility for buys, injury, and then you look at the wide receiver position: Drake London, T. Higgins, Amik Egbuka, Trey Harris, and Cortland Sutton. That is a fantastic core with a ton of upside, in my opinion. He can kind of sit on Ibuka and play Sutton. He also has Harris, who's a guy that I'm very high on. So that comes into play later. Yes, the running back position is a little bit sketchy in Judkins and Aaron Jones, but I do think that in the interim, let's say this is just a 1 year window for him to start with, he has enough to work with. I mean, obviously, we didn't finish the draft, so he could have got some more running backs. He's got the ability to make trades or whatever he needs to do, but I love this build. He adds some tight ends with youth. He has Sam Laporta, big time playmaker at tight end. He also has Ferguson, who I know you are very high on. I like. Rams are extremely high on him. And then he also has Harold Fannin, who's a good dart throw, in my opinion, in the 15th round. So I think he did a fantastic draft here. Yes, he could improve the running back position, but pretty solid overall, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. And he can always toss some picks over to get some veterans, right, and buy low on some guys. Obviously, this draft would have continued, and if we take a look at what was left on the board, I don't even know if I can. I actually don't think you can see
We can.
the
I don't
rest.
think.
Yeah,
No.
but I don't. There, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there was a ton that was left. I think he probably could have avoided taking Ferguson and Fannin, and I hate to say that because I like Ferguson, but I wouldn't have minded, maybe taking a chance on, Ramondre Stevenson or Rashad White just to give you a safe floor player. But at the same time, right, if you really like Ferguson, you can trade for guys like Rashad White and Stevenson, right, and make sure you get your guy in Ferguson. I agree with you, though. It's a really nice build. You get really good quarterback play here. You could probably trade Tyler Shuck, right, to somebody, for a veteran running back, maybe and a third round pick if Shuck ends up being the starter for a couple weeks into the season and there's a team that needs a quarterback. You get Egbuka, you get Harris. You can wait on those two guys to produce while plugging in Sutton at your wide receiver 3. So I think that's a really, really nice build there with the wide receivers. Overall, high upside team, young. I really like the team too as well. Now, before we close out here, is there a specific team that maybe you don't love that you don't love a ton? I think for me, I think it's probably Hoff's team, but I think it really had to do more with. I think he
Yeah,
got auto picked a couple of times. So
he did. Yeah, he
yeah,
had several autos. I think I'm with you. That's probably the team that I would pick on. The quarterback room, it's a little bit dicey when Tua is your quarterback too. I always say I'm comfortable with Tua being my QB3, not my QB2. Just
yeah,
because anything goes wrong, you're screwed. Solid running back room in Gibbs, Genty, and Brees Hall. The wide receiver room of Rice, that's a big pick in Rice at the 310 over guys like Tet, Hunter, T. Higgins, Flowers, Odunze, Worthy. Just in my opinion,
yeah.
obviously I'd take Rice over Worthy. So let me back up just a little bit. But
Me
I
too.
think it's a little bit of a reach, but I don't hate it. I know he's high on Rice, so
Yeah, I'm with you there. But that's going to do it for us, guys. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate you guys tuning in to the stream. I don't know why I'm so big here. We're still getting used to this software. There we go. Nice and clean. But we appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. At one point, I think at one point we had 15 people tuning in on YouTube, which is super, super awesome to see just for our second live stream. So we appreciate you guys. If you guys are new, please hit that subscribe button. Follow Matt on Twitter at the FF Mediators. You can also follow me on Twitter at Supernova with 2 R's 38. And we'll